Okay, we've got the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Always like to be very cognizant of time and everybody's time that they're taking away from their day job and customers. So with that, I want to welcome everybody to the official webinar, Bridging the Generational Gap, People-Centric Solutions for Financial Health. I'm Doug Hale from EverFi, and we're thrilled to share the conversation with members of the Financial Health Network. So on behalf of the panelists, which we will introduce here shortly, thank you for attending. Today, again, I want you all to be comfortable. Hopefully you have your beverage of choice, coffee, water, maybe a Coke. Sit down, take in everything that we've got. If you have any questions, we have a Q&A. Please submit a question and we will have time at the end to kind of go over. But today, what we will explore is financial institutions and how you all can meet the evolving needs of every generation. And that's, basically blending education, access, data, and partnerships. So I mentioned the rockstar panel that we've got. Today joining us are incredible leaders in the financial space. I've got Casey, Dennis, and Brooke. And with that, Casey, I'll turn it over to you, kind of just do a brief intro.
Sure. Thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Cutler. I'm Vice President of Product Management here at EverFi. My team creates financial educational content for really K through Gray. So we focus on learner outcomes, knowledge, attitude, behavior change within those different segments. My previous life, I was an instructional designer. So I really developed content from everything from ball bearing manufacturing to breastfeeding. So I do know a lot about creating valuable education, data-driven education. So I'm happy to be here to talk to you all today. I will pass it over to Dennis.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Duquette. I am Head of Community Responsibility at Mass Mutual and also Service President of the Mass Mutual Foundation. Our work is focused primarily on helping build financial capability and resilience, particularly in communities where those opportunities haven't existed for, in some cases, multiple generations. So we've learned very quickly and helpfully that in order to do the work, it's really good to look at data, rely on data, but also talk to the people that we're impacting and to find the right partnerships that can help us scale the solutions that we find through our work. So happy to be here with all of you today.
Wonderful. Brooke.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Henninger. I head up Mass Mutual's financial wellness and segment marketing team, and I lead a team of content, financial wellness, and segment marketers, all with the focus on connecting people to tools, resources, product solutions to help them achieve financial well-being. So I'm really excited to join you all today.
Wonderful. Casey, Dennis, and Brooke, thank you. As mentioned before, my name's Doug Hale. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at EverFi. I've been here for almost a year. Previous life, I spent a little over a decade in the financial services space at a community bank. My heart and soul is in education, though. I've got a master's in business education and marketing, so that's kind of what drew me to EverFi, and thus some of the topics that we're going to discover today. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our first topic. We've got several themes that we want to kind of discuss, and hopefully you all can get some good information to take back to your senior executives, your board members, and maybe some ideas of things to implement. But with that, Casey, would you like to introduce our first theme?
Sure. I'm going to start by hitting on generational needs in financial education. And this topic is extremely kind of relevant to me. My daughter lost a tooth the other day. And as you know, the tooth fairy comes and she was lucky enough to get some money from it. And having conversations with different generations about, what that means, income, earned income. It's something, even as someone who teaches financial literacy, I felt myself not always well prepared to answer. We talked about what do you want to do with that money? How would you want to spend it? You talk about saving that money and growing that money, and you see their eyes getting even bigger. So I think this is very relevant to a lot of, both parents, communities, for kind of how we talk about addressing, financial education at those early stages and then beyond. And I feel very lucky that I have that opportunity to have those conversations. But I want to kind of pose this to our moderators today, especially when we think about how financial education and how financial institutions could be more responsive to different generational needs when building that financial education program. The financial lives of our different generations, obviously Gen Alpha, those who may be earning money through losing teeth, but Gen Z, Millennial, Gen X, and Boomers, those lives look very different, and that has implications for how we educate and engage. So I want to start, Brooke, as our first panelist. What are you seeing when it comes to shaping messaging or delivery for different generations?
Sure. Thanks, Casey. And also, we might have to sidebar on what the going rate for the tooth
Yes.
fairy is these days. If there's any impacts of inflation to that, yes or no. But in answer to your question, I would say for us, it really comes down to knowing our customer and then showing up in the right context. And I think as someone who's done financial wellness marketing for a long time, that's been pretty standard year over year, but the context always changes and the customer is always changing. So we usually start with some sort of research pulse check. Who are we trying to reach? What's top of mind for them? What are their pain points? And then how do they like to engage? How do they want to engage with us as a brand, or with some of our partners like EverFi? And so an example of this would be Gen Z. Gen Z's thinking about all the financial first jobs, first paychecks, their first home, a lot of those big first money decisions that they're going to be making that set them out on, this financial course. And Gen Z tends to not only want quick answers on demand, but they want it short. They want it to the point. We can't bury the lead. And then you compare that to boomers, and boomers are also knee deep in financial firsts, but theirs are really thinking through having that first conversation with family to talk about your long-term wishes, much more of a difficult conversation. Navigating Social Security benefits for the first time, what those first years in retirement are going to be like. And so we find that boomers often value personal connection and conversation. So as we design our financial wellness solutions, we're doing this with all of these life stages and preferences of engagement in mind. Dennis, anything you want to add to that?
I would just say, at the MassMutual Foundation, we start from a very simple place, and that is understanding the need of the people that we're looking to serve. And so, very much in keeping with the outlines, Brooke, that you just laid out, our research happens on the ground. It's really imperative that we go into the communities that we are aiming to serve and meet with the residents of that community, the organization, the leaders of the organizations and leaders in that community, to really understand what are the impediments that have been keeping members of that community from achieving financial capability and ultimately financial resilience. It's only then that we can then start to think about what the best solutions might be. And as we've discovered in our work, those solutions, sometimes they're very similar from community to community, sometimes they're vastly different. And so making sure that we have that footing, that foundational footing to understand what the needs are, what's driving the needs, and what the potential solutions might look like can then inform how we best form partnerships with other organizations like EverFi and others to really satisfy those needs.
Dennis and Brooke, you both are spot on. And Brooke, you said something I want to kind of reiterate too, is that you all do a pulse check, and basically what you're doing is you're getting to know the customer. You're getting to know what their needs are, what their financial goals are, where they are in the moment. And, the data backs this up. We talk about different generational learnings and the way that we intake data. For instance, Gen Z learners are 2.5 times more likely to complete education or financial education modules if it's mobile first and visual. They're very visual learners and they're mobile first. They've been born with a smartphone in their hand. On the opposite spectrum, boomers are very straightforward. They want language and goal-driven initiatives. They want a goal-driven narrative. They're coming to you, or they seek financial information or education with a goal in mind, typically. I'm part of the Gen X, and I kind of straddle the line between both. I'm very goal-oriented, seeking those goal-oriented outcomes, but I'm also a visual learner, and I want to try it mobile first. So that's, and again, it's knowing who your consumer is, it's knowing who your customer is, and meeting them kind of in the place of need. And it's not just, matching the content, but the delivery format for each generation. And data shows that That's really the key to increasing the impact and engagement.
Yeah, we have so much valuable data available to us at our fingertips today, and I think it's really important, as all you kind of noted, to make sure you know your audience, how you want to reach them, how you can get to them, and then how you can continue to use that data, right? There's a lot of valuable inputs that you could be getting from your education um, programs, whether it's, reusing data, retargeting individuals, making sure that, you can go back and continue to engage them over time through those different either delivery formats. Multimodal is really important these days, I think, too. Making sure you're getting someone who, if their learning preferences is mobile, is, synchronous, let's give them that type of experience. So I think making sure you're offering a multitude of different types of delivery formats is really important now. I want to zoom out a little bit and just talk about building generational wealth beyond education. Um, Outside of education, what are the most impactful ways that institutions can help build generational wealth? I think especially for undercapitalized communities. I know this has been kind of a big focus of the foundation. So Dennis, I'd like to start with you to kind of hear about the foundation's work in this area.
Sure, Casey. Thank you. And, we spent a good 6 or 7 years doing a lot of hyperlocal work with communities in Springfield, with some select communities in Boston, and also a community in Memphis, Tennessee, to really fully understand, again, what I said earlier, what those impediments are, but what solutions could look like to address those solutions. Because remember, we're driven by need, and our goal is to really provide access and opportunity. So with that, we now find that we focus on four main pillars. The first being the use of networks. What we find consistently is that, particularly in underserved communities, there is a disconnect that exists between not just the people in the community themselves, but the people with the institutions or the organizations that can help them. So how can we bring about more cohesion, really build that social capital that's so important to connecting people to the resources that they need, to access opportunity, to gain education, to find a job, et cetera. Our second pillar is really making sure that our basic needs are met. I mean, if we're talking about financial capability and resiliency over the long term, people can't focus on that if they're worried about where they're going to be living in a month or where they're getting their food. So making sure that those basic needs are met is really, really imperative. The third pillar is around supporting initiatives that drive employment and income, regular income for these individuals. That's sort of a no-brainer. There are a lot of organizations, a lot of resources out there that people, again, just aren't familiar with. So our ability to bring those resources to bear is really an important role for the foundation and for other partners that we can bring into those conversations. The last pillar is really focused on financial health. And, when you think of things like opening a savings account, rates of savings, improving credit scores, those types of things, making sure that once we've gotten folks into a cycle that is working for them, making sure that they are able to then save and build for the future and in terms of their finances. I like to think of the pillars. In my linear world, I tend to think of them on a continuum, but obviously experience tells us that from community to community, individual to individual, any one of those pillars could be emphasized over another. It really is unique to the individual and to the community. And so now that we've learned all this, how do we scale this impact? And so, that's where the value of partnerships with an organization like EverFi or another organization that we just partnered with, the Opportunity Finance work, that network, that's where we're able to actually take what we've learned at the local level and find a way to scale it without incurring a lot of incremental costs, finding a national partner who's got the footprint and the resources to help us extend that lesson. You think about what we've done with Future Smart, which is the program that we have done with EverFi over the last 10 years. We've been in every state in the United States. We are in every state in the United States as well as the territory of Puerto Rico. Millions and millions of children have been touched by this. We've done studies to understand the impact of the learning itself and what's needed beyond that. So again, taking what we learn, and in this case, knowing that education is foundational to building a strong financial future, and working with a partner like EverFi to scale it and to learn and to grow has been really, really great for us.
And Dennis, I might just chime in and add on to that. When you mention access and scale, I think another thing we try to do is continue to democratize financial guidance by offering multiple access points to it. And one way we do that at MassMutual is through leveraging one of our biggest assets. And we have a vast network of financial professionals, and they have the training, they know, they have the guidance that they can offer to help people, get on and stay on the path to generational wealth. But I think access, ultimately is the key to it. And how do we create more access points for people?
Sure.
I love the conversation about scale. And, from our perspective, EverFi perspective, we're seeing a lot of energy around employee-sponsored education, the ESG, environmental, social governance aligned product design, and even some, micro investing solutions. But I think, the key really is, like you said, it's scale. In somebody like, for instance, MassMutual, who's hundreds of billions of dollars in assets versus somebody who's, a small community bank or credit union that might be, 200 or 300 million. The formula really is still the same. It's what makes the difference is combining the education, the access, trusted touch points, and it's the partnership. It's EverFi. It helps institutions like you all connect the dots kind of between the knowledge and behavior. It's providing the access to the tools and the opportunities when learners feel most confident wherever that is in their generational life. And then, again, aligning that moment with their ability or readiness to act. And I think that's something, especially for the audience that we have on the call right now. When I was in the banking world, we were a smaller community bank. We were over the billion threshold, but that was something we looked at. We were too small to do something, or at least we felt we were too small to do some things, but we were a larger community bank. And that was a question that we internally faced all the time. It's okay, well, how do we achieve this type of impact that a Mass Mutual is doing? We don't have the manpower for it, and a lot of that is, and like you said, Dennis, it's with the partnerships. So that's an underlying, kind of answer to the formula that I think goes unsaid sometimes.
Right. And even for a company like MassMutual, Doug, to your point, we have a lot of financial resources, but there are other resources that we don't have, that preclude us from doing our community work in every state in the country. But
Mhm.
look,
Absolutely.
leaning on you all at EverFi, and as I mentioned earlier, our partnership with Opportunity Finance Network, that allows us to scale the work that is important to us that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do just by the sheer volume of people needed to do it.
Exactly. Let's shift a little bit. I want to do a time check, and like I said, we got a couple different themes to address, and it looks like we're good on time. So again, we will have opportunity for questions and answers. I see one that's kind of more of a comment, but funny, and we may touch on it at the end. But if you have questions during any of this, we will have opportunity at the end. But I'm very interested to find out what you all think about this topic of focusing on people first. We talked about, meeting the customer, knowing who they are, doing kind of a temperature check, a culture check. So I want to discuss kind of the future of people first innovation. And, that's kind of the focus, like I said, on more people first and less about product per se, which coming from the financial world, we push and we sell our products. So that's a little bit different avenue of thinking. So I guess my first question is, what would a people-centric roadmap look like for improving financial health across life stages? I want to go a little bit a step further, but I would love to hear discussion on what are some of the signals that you're watching for. How is that innovation, especially like digital innovation today, shaping your strategies now? And then even into the next strategic cycle. That's something that we speak on the financial world a lot is, we've got a strategic plan and we're looking not just 1 year down the road, we're looking 3, 5 years, 10 years down the road. So with that, Brooke, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Sure. That's a tall order, Doug. But in thinking about a people-centric roadmap, I would say something that we always start with is that our people-centric roadmap has to recognize kind of two core components or two common truths. And that is, one, we as people have many overlapping identities. And when you pair that with our lived experiences across life stages, there's a lot to consider when it comes to financial health and understanding our audience. And the second piece is just really deeply believing in the intersectionality of health, that our physical, mental, and financial health are deeply connected and dependent on each other. And so I feel like everything we do, we start from this place of understanding, people are multifaceted and they bring a lot to the table. And also, health is very much, our financial health and our financial outcomes cannot happen without physical and mental health kind of coming along for someone's overall well-being. So in terms of people-centric roadmap, that's where we start. And trying to reach people in this way is where digital innovation is key, and leveraging partnerships at scale. And so, if we have a goal of offering the right guidance at the right time, and we're trying to be product agnostic, we're trying to be people and guidance first. So depending on life stage, if you just graduated or graduating this May from college, if you're growing a family, if you're getting ready to retire, how do we use this digital innovation to help us deliver and meet you in that right place and where you are? So an example that comes to mind for me is work that we launched this year in partnership with EverFi, which is our Stay Ready with MassMutual program. So Dennis mentioned our longtime partnership on FutureSmart, how many students we're reaching nationwide. And the Stay Ready with MassMutual program is really a build on that. And how do we look at college age and young professional and reach people as they're starting out in their careers? And it was a tall order for EverFi to think about this holistic learning experience. And how do we combine digital learning with offline workshops? How do we pair it with guidance from financial professionals? And how do we think about that overall health outcomes? And so I think it was something that EverFi helped us do to help us continue to be people first and really show up for people's overall well-being. Dennis,
Yeah,
anything you want to add there?
yeah, I mean, a couple of things that you said I'm gonna build upon, but where I would start, particularly from the foundation standpoint, is we come into this conversation, we come into this work, and we think you have to come into this work with a healthy amount of humility. We don't know the answer. I think it might be assumed that because Mass Mutual or Bank of America or Fidelity or whoever, the large financial institutions have all the answers. We don't have all the answers, which is why what Brooke articulated about, really understanding the customers, it's marketing 101. Having products is great, but if there's not things your customers are looking for, then you're wasting your efforts. And so, having that humility to admit that you have to learn as much as you can, and we do that. As I mentioned earlier, through our work at the foundation, and we also look at data, the more broad-based data to understand how what we're seeing at the local level is tracking with broader studies on a particular topic. I love that Brooke mentioned the link between mental, physical, and financial health. That is something that we have experienced up close and personal firsthand through our work at the foundation. Really, through our work with the Boston Medical Center and what Brooke herself is involved in, one of the outgrowths of our work through the foundation there, understanding that inextricable link between financial health and physical health. And it's much more the solutions to these challenges are much more complex than a single one size fits all. And so that's why it's important to meet people where they are, to understand the data, but again, to have those conversations. And I would hearken back, Doug, to something that you said, and Brooke also mentioned this, when you think about our work with EverFi, in particular with FutureSmart. For the longest time, I've been around, for 100 years, and I've been working in financial services a long time, and we know that financial literacy is really a pet cause that many financial institutions like. But for so many years, it really wasn't going anywhere. The Jumpstart Coalition that measures the impact of financial literacy would measure it every few years. They'd measure the impact, the growth, and for many years, the acumen was not growing. In fact, it was receding. And my opinion, and that of many others who have been working in the CSR field for many years, was that we weren't meeting kids where they were. And what our partnership with EverFi has afforded us is meeting kids in a way and on a platform that they are eager to engage in, and the results of that speak for themselves. And so, that's again understanding whatever generation you're talking about, how they like to interact, what their needs are. That's going to inform the best solution.
Yeah, and I really can't begin to describe the immense value that EverFi has gotten out of this partnership in being able to really, turn the data that we're getting from this longitudinal study, from, the different amounts of impact that we're able to deliver with the foundation into the design of programs. And we're incredibly evidence-based as we look at how to actually design the right type of education, and then moving kind of beyond education into what those actual next steps need to be. From the longitudinal research, we know that these actionable lessons not only improve learners' financial behaviors, but they also encourage more conversations among families on related financial topics. And I think that's really important. During an interview, I once spoke to a father about credit, and he did not feel equipped to speak to his children about credit because his credit was so poor. He said, I'm not the right example. But I think when you're fostering, the early education, you're fostering the confidence to multi-generations to kind of think about how we can start these conversations. It's okay to have poor credit. There's an opportunity to build, and it's, not everyone's going to have, the rainbow story here. There's going to be kind of different journeys that people are going to take. And I think when your institution is thinking about these different wraparound services that they can use to support this generational journey, to Dennis's point earlier, it's a hierarchy, and I think providing the education can be step one. But there's the additional kind of opportunity to provide or further foster these interactions, informal learning, supporting through financial tools, different opportunities, community investment, obviously, that kind of helps get here. So I think it's very important that we kind of think about how we use that data to continue to build outside of just your traditional, let me teach you about credit and debt, but let's go back into this application. How do we continue to talk about it? How do we see over time that actually has a greater impact on individuals' financial wellness?
Yeah, really, really, really good input. And I think there's a few things I've been taking notes, and there's a few things I want to revisit. I do want to say that there are some really good questions in the comments and questions, the Q&A section, and we will discuss those. But a few things I wrote down. Brooke, you had mentioned a couple times the verbiage kind of mental health, or mental health and financial health, and what we are starting to see in the industry is a combination of those because they are related, and it's really we talk about it internally as kind of financial wellness. It's part of mental, and take it on the employee side. You have financially happy employees. You have employees that are mentally sound. They're going to work better. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to volunteer more. That's the same with your customers as well. So I think you all are probably seeing it as we do. Like I said, internally, there's a little bit of a shift towards, okay, let's not just focus on financial health. Let's talk about financial wellness. And that's kind of the well-being and the generational change. It's not, I want to meet you right here and provide a product or a format of, modules and learning. It's, let's now put that into action and move that forward, and let's help you change. Many people today are probably just like I was. Anything financial, finances, financial education was passed down through my family, through my parents, right or wrong, those kind of life experiences and finances. And what we find is that either those conversations don't take place. Like Casey said, she had a conversation and they didn't feel adequate. They didn't feel, adequately sound to really provide that learning lesson to their children, or it doesn't take place, or it's not a good situation. That you can pull data all day long that the vast majority of Americans are in debt. So that's not a positive encouragement. So what better way than, to be able to do like Mass Mutual is doing, like hundreds of our other partners are doing, and actually be able to meet these people, meet these consumers, these learners, not only in the school system at a young age, but all the way through their generational cycle. We talked about product cycles too. And I want to make clear too, I was a director of marketing at a bank, and we had our marketing calendars. We had, hey, it's home buying season, HELOC season. We're gonna, there's always financial seasons of when you market certain things, but product cycles do not equate or equal life cycles, life stages. Every consumer is completely different. They might buy a home in December. That's not home buying season. And it's really knowing your consumer, knowing when to meet them with the information that you've got. And we talked about, people centric as well. And that's kind of the key of all of it. It's the key to further engagement, increased engagement. It's the key of building that generational wealth. It's the key of building that brand loyalty for the financial institution. It's being really people centric first and less product centric. And that really definition of that I like to give it's the customer experience, it's the customer journey. We all have, does somebody uh, shop at, buy a Starbucks coffee when you could go to the gas station and get one for, half or, three-quarters of the price, so we all have scenarios or examples of where we've had a really, really good positive experience that we're willing to pay more for. So that's something too that, again, it's, product doesn't always equal those life cycles and stuff. And it's really about the impact. It's being able to tell that story, tell the story. Dennis, you spoke on, financial education when it first, it first started kind of ramping up. It was on everybody's radar, but for a lot of financial institutions, it's like, well, we've got a resource tab or we've got a learning tab on our website. It's available. That's not going to reach people. It's you've got to be able to you've got to be very intentional and again meet them where they are when they are. So those are just some of the things that last theme that really stuck out at me that I wanted to highlight.
It's Doug, there's a question I wanted to address too, in the comments around kind of
Yeah.
structuring a successful partnership here. And I think one of the things that I would say is as we worked with different partners is to start small and make sure you can like continue through that entire life cycle, through those different measurement opportunities. So, as an example, let's say you do want to award a student a value into a 529 or into a savings account. One of the challenges there is you can go through, someone can get access to that that funding, but what if the student or the parent doesn't understand what a 529 account is, how to manage it long term, how to even access it and get it established in their state. I think, that is you may say that's like one element of our larger picture, but you have to make sure then you're able to, provide the additional wraparound services that would support that family for using that plan, for knowing how to grow that plan and continue to use it over time. And I think, starting small in that kind of sense and thinking about how would the impact that I'm making today be reflected in the future, and how do I continue to think about the life cycle of this family, of this individual, about how I may serve them. But all those, even small amounts of financial tools that you may be giving someone, they need to understand and how to use them long term. So I think when you're structuring a program and looking for partners, take that customer journey. Think about what that's going to mean to them as they're getting access to these different resources, and make sure that you could have that continued program. And it also helps because it's not a one-time program that we're doing for a year. It's something that you can actually get behind long term. And I think that's what we're seeing in the data. It's going to be more powerful when you can include something that has that longer tail to it.
Casey, you said it. Now, I want to say this again: is take the customer journey, take it from the beginning all the way to the end, and it's not just a drop off. It's not a product. We offered a product, a tab on the website, and the customer took it fine and dandy. We got CRA credit for it, or we got a new account opening for it, or whatever. Transition yourself then into not just a transactional entity. Now you are a financial advisor, or a financial consultant to them. I promise you that on an individual scale, if you make a great impact, if you make a generational impact as something as now I understand these financial implications. I understand how this credit score affects me. You'll have a customer for life. You build loyalty, you build brand equity, and that's something that is really, really difficult to put a dollar amount on. So, I mean, that's spot on, very spot on. We're doing good on time, which is great. This gives an opportunity. I want to highlight our partnership spotlight. That's a tongue twist. Our partnership spotlight with EverFi and Mass Mutual. So this is kind of our last theme before we go into a Q&A, but I want to close by highlighting the power of collaboration. You've heard it multiple times from me, from Casey, from Dennis to Brooke. And this goes much beyond just even Mass Mutual and EverFi. Again, it's partnerships. But what I want to really talk about is what makes EverFi and Mass Mutual partnership unique and what lessons that you all can take away from this conversation with other financial partners. Dennis, we'll go ahead and open with you.
Sure. Thanks, Doug. When we talk about our partnership through the foundation with EverFi and we focus on the Future Smart program, we have this tendency to sort of veer right into the metrics and talk about, look at all the great things we've done, look how many kids we've reached, and look at the data from the studies, and that's wonderful. But you have to back up from that. What makes this a great partnership for the foundation and for EverFi is that we most definitely have a shared sense of purpose. We understand that the fundamental belief that in order for people to become successful financially, they need access to information and education. They need access to the financial instruments that are going to help them get there, and that they have to have continual access to the support mechanism. I love what Casey said about, this isn't a set it and forget it proposition we're talking about here when we're talking about someone's financial life and their outlook. This takes constant monitoring and care. And so we share that that sentiment very, very strongly with EverFi. And I think that's been really, really helpful. And understanding that, like most things, education itself is foundational to being successful financially and to building a life of financial capability and resilience. And so, having the expertise resident at EverFi to help us identify, where do we bring this education effort, and by targeting middle school in particular, and citing that middle school is a time in a child's young adults trajectory where they are starting to make value decisions that are going to stay with them through the rest of their life. And so this is a very fertile time for us to be getting in front of them with this very important education. So again, starting with a shared purpose and then understanding and agreeing, what are the key levers that we need to focus on together in order to advance, the vision that we both share.
Dennis, outstanding. Brooke, what would you like to add?
Sure. I think we complement each other well. It's just, it's a really good partnership. And I know the question in the chat, Casey, that you were speaking to, I feel like we both came to the table really understanding what we were looking for from each other, what those mutual expectations were, and we have a shared definition of success. So it feels like we're in it together. Some pros of EverFi: you all absolutely bring digital fluency, instructional design. You help us with speed to market. You're fast and you're agile. And you bring a lot of reach, and you've worked with multiple partners. So you have a lot of lessons learned about, hey, this works well. We've learned that this doesn't, hit as well. You might consider something else. And I feel like we bring the community relationships, especially through Dennis and the foundation. And then we have the financial products. We have the engaged financial professionals, and we have an engaged and captive audience. So we're pushing out to a captive audience. We're able to report back on data. And I think there's a good synergy between us.
Yeah, I agree. I think, it's mutually beneficial. EverFi's value is that we offer the channel for delivery through our relationships with schools and districts. We have the medium of content for the financial education, but we need the expertise, the time, the investment from Mass Mutual, I think, to be able to deliver a deeper connection. Having someone in an industry go into a school and talk about, their life experiences, to teach a lesson, just to be able to make a connection with a student is one of the most valuable pieces of data we can. I love like seeing our quantitative data where we trend kind of upwards and being able to see engagement metrics, deeper learner retention, more informed decisions being made. But when you get to go into an event or a school and you have that experience of a student who has decided, I'm going to make a different choice in my future, or you see that light bulb moment of, I want to save money. I don't want to spend money. I think that's the true value that this partnership offers. And again, that's what we're both trying to provide here to the students and to different generations.
Yeah, one thing that you all mentioned was kind of vision and purpose, and that's something when you look about any partnership, you have to have like and mutual vision, for the outcome. And I will say this that much like your consumer base, no one partnership is identical. Mass Mutual does something that is very unique and fits their purpose, their strategic plan. It fits what they do and is ingrained in their culture. That may not be an exact fit elsewhere. So that's something that, when we look at partnerships and opportunities, it's, well, what makes sense? Kind of looking at it through a how can we lens, not a well, no, because there's not just one set formula of here's the way that you provide financial wellness, financial education. It's a multitude, and there's so many different moving aspects and parts to it. So, with that, I do want to thank Brooke and Dennis for being on a Mass Mutual. Very, very valued partnership. For anyone looking to build similar partnerships, again, align your values, stay focused on the learner, invest in the long-term impact. I think that's something you've heard kind of referred to over and over again today. Is it's not about one place, one time, set it and forget it. It's really about playing the long-term game. A single course, single financial education course by itself, no matter how good it is, it's not, it's simply not enough. We talk about data-driven numbers, and we're in the financial institution space. We're in the financial wellness space. We understand that a lot of that is data metrics and data-driven. But at the end of the day, bring it down singular. If you can make a positive impact on one child, and not even a child, just say a consumer or a person in their time of need, that then shifts their behavior, and it's truly a generational change. By God, that's worth it. That's something, that's the impact that doesn't happen overnight. But it is impact that lasts. So, that's what we talk about, internally as generational impact or generational change. You've heard me say that several times today. So, I want to take some time again. We've got about, I don't know, 15, 18 minutes left or so. We do have a few questions in the Q&A. Let's see. I'll go ahead and read the first one. What kind of data is generated via these partnerships? Casey, do you want to start
Yeah,
with that
I can
one, and
I can
then
take that. Well, first of all, we've been partners for a long time, so we do have a valuable amount of data that we're doing specific to Mass Mutual. Dennis kind of mentioned the experience with Future Smart, which is a middle school focused financial literacy. EverFi does structure our content to be delivered with standards aligned education. So we're seeing kind of a national impact of teachers using this in schools. We're able to get data around knowledge gain, impact to the students. What are they most likely to do as a result of taking this education? And we have, year over year information for that course. We've expanded that partnership through a high school experience as well. So we're able to kind of see these attitude and behavior changes. But we've also engaged in a longitudinal research. So because we had students who were going through Future Smart, who by the time, our partnership was 8 years old, had gone through both Future Smart in middle school and then into a high school experience, and now are making financial decisions with their as they kind of enter the workforce or they go into a higher education experience. We've been able to study these students and their families as they've kind of matured through this education. And I mentioned kind of before, some of the key elements are how, our ability to engage the entire family in a structure. So by providing education at that stage, as a student is kind of within adolescence, they actually start to make an impact on their families' financial outcomes and finances and wealth drivers, because they're having those conversations at home where otherwise they may not have been able to do that. So, that's some of the value of the data that we're able to attain from our K-12 program and our longitudinal research. And then, we also kind of mentioned the additional financial education that we're able to deliver to the adult audiences. So these are also going to be attitude, behavior changes, as you're engaging in a credit or debt tool, what are you most likely going to do as a result of this? Or you just learned about emergency savings. Are you more likely to open an emergency savings account? How may you do that in the future? So this is some of the data that we're able to capture, through the experience for education itself. And then again, MassMutual is able to get a lot of additional information on how is that impacting the customer journey? How much more likely are those individuals who've gone through some of this education to engage with them on other products or services they may be able to offer?
So the long and short of it is, it's a lot of data, basically, and it is. And I will say this: there's really no right or wrong answer as far as the data, in that every partnership is different. What Mass Mutual might want to see as far as data metrics may not be what your institution wants to see, and it really comes down to, why are you using the product? What is the product serving as the solution for? If it's CRA, maybe you're going to want more social impact and community development type data. Maybe it's going to, you want help actually telling your social impact story. Maybe you've got, something in your annual report or your social impact report that you've got to have some data metrics on. So that's something that we're able to kind of shift and balance and stuff, and pull different things out. But good answer. Next question I've got in the chat is, what have you found to be the best way to deeply get to know your client? What has worked best for the lowest cost? So Brooke and Dennis, why don't you all, from a Mass Mutual perspective, answer that?
Dennis, if it's okay with you, I saw this one in the chat and I wrote down two thoughts, but then I'll pass it over to you. So the first one, Gabriella, my question back to you is, do you have members of your target audience as employees where you work? Because I think one of the things we've been able to leverage a lot at Mass Mutual is reaching out and using our employees, because many of them are part of our target audience. And so a lot of times companies have employee resource groups or some sort of affinity association that is also looking to drive, business outcomes and add value back to the business. So it's a mutual partnership. When we launched the Stay Ready program with EverFi, we piloted it with several of our employee resource groups first. We had them do the education modules and test the tools. So they served as kind of tech hackers and QA people trying to break it, but also saying, hey, you missed the mark on this, or yes, this was really helpful. So definitely consider getting insights from your employees. And then another idea is, if you have any fintech accelerators or incubators near you, Mass Mutual works with the Mass Challenge, and we do kind of a mutual mentoring program. But a lot of time, fintech startups are looking just to work with a company on proof of concept. And so they're willing to test things and do surveys and different things at no cost, because they're trying to build to scale and they're also trying to serve a business need. And my last idea was just zero-party data tools. So we use Jebit at Mass Mutual, but there's a ton of tools out there where you can ask people what they want and what they're interested in and what they're looking for, and they give you that information without having to go through a formal survey. So those were my top 3 tips. Anything you want to add, Dennis?
I would just say, at the community level, it's slightly different, but the underlying goal is the same. And so, for us, if we're going into a community, and in order for us to really understand what the residents of that community need, we're going to want to meet with those residents. In order to do that, we have to form partnerships. We have to establish relationships with trusted organizations in that community that can help bring us into those conversations. And that word trusted is very important. I think, Brooke, that tracks into, the consumer side of the enterprise at MassMutual too, particularly when we're talking about financial health and financial viability, anything financially related. There is an undercurrent of trust that must be established. And so, you do that certain ways as a business, by doing due cetera. You do it certain ways, if you're interacting at the community level. So, research is also important, but again, what are the relationships that are going to get you a trusted seat in a conversation with the population that you're trying to serve?
This question may piggyback kind of off of those answers, but the question is, what would you suggest to a financial service provider that wants to start incorporating a life cycle lens to their value proposition?
Brooke, I'll let you take that one.
Well, I feel like that could be a whole
Yeah.
6-week sprint work stream there. But I would just say, if you're starting to think about life stages or life cycles, having a people-centric approach to both your value prop or your digital roadmap, whatever it be, really think through, like, what are the outcomes? What are you trying to gain? How might you use the segmentation if you're going by life stage or life cycle? What is it that you're trying to do with it? And does your value prop stand the test of time? When we create marketing value props, they're meant to be overarching, regardless of life stage, regardless of product, regardless if you shift your business to a whole other, focus. The value prop should be able to stand the test of time. So it's kind of pressure testing the two. Like, what's in it for you in the business by doing this life cycle
Right.
lens? And do you have the right value prop that can still serve all of those customers across those stages?
And Brooke, it's really, again, it's playing the long game. It's looking at a consumer, looking at where they are and not thinking, well, are they going to be profitable this year? Let's look 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. What type of, family equity can we get? Are they married? Do they have a spouse? Do they have children? How is that account going to now expand? So
Yeah.
that's another way of looking at it. Casey, you've got a direct question in here, which I love. It says, Casey, with a tactical design lens, how do you move from insights to action, getting design professionals to consider the individual circumstances, needs, preferences, etc., in their product design, development, and delivery processes?
That's a really great question. So, and it actually kind of blends well with the previous question, I think, because when you're, looking at what someone needs or what someone wants to do, some of our research has actually shown us that learners, when they engage in education, there's only really one financial product that over 70% of learners would say they would engage in with no education or information. Does anyone know what that may be on the call? It's opening a credit card. So, which shouldn't surprise us, knowing kind of where we are with credit card debt. But I think that, knowing that there's a need for both education and then people need to know what they should be doing as they kind of engage with that product or service overall. So, timing up again, when you think about your life cycle experience and it is something that you want to target different life cycles, or I you can call it life cycles. I actually do like to kind of think of it as like your financial decision making points in your customer journey. So you could have someone who is, a Gen Zer who is purchasing a home, and you could have a boomer who may be purchasing a home, and they could have different financial situations. They could have similar financial situations, but again, it's that point in time of I may not necessarily need to know about something until I'm ready to do it. So I think when you're thinking about using the design to make both the education more actionable is, you want to make sure you're approaching them at that right time, at that point of decision. So it's being there, as Dennis said, it's being that trusted source. So they're going to go to you or your institution first as they're looking to make this decision or find this information. So I think presenting and leading with education, presenting and leading with even just a partner, right? Like I am remembering that that brand is there, that is a brand I would want to engage with, and I can go to them because I'm trusting them in this experience is going to be very important. And then again, making sure you're not giving them too much information at a time, but you're giving them those like actionable next steps in how I do this. So I think what we've seen as our customers have started to think about their own customer journey for how do we get someone engaged with a piece of content or knowledge and trust, making sure you can place, what is that next step for you, making sure then, in your campaign or within your journey, you're putting in those follow-up opportunities, you're making sure that there's a very clear call to action for what you want them to do, how you engage with them, how they talk to someone, how they get more information, right, up until that point of decision. And so I think some people tend to start exploring first, right, until they get kind of further on down the line. So you have to continue to kind of engage there. But I do think it's all about kind of thinking about it from a decision lens and making sure you're that resource that they're going to go to and you have that follow through application.
Yeah, I mean, the financial institution being the resource, they're the subject matter expert. So that's, logically, that's the first place that your consumer is going to turn to. And, as far as the question, the design, considering individual circumstances and kind of the needs to be able to shift or change, Casey, that's where I would, the internally where we have shifted some of our learning, what we consider pathways. It's let's really look at the cycle is what we've called it on this call, but internally we consider it a pathway. It's kind of a journey. It's a goal-oriented set, and let's make it digestible. Let's make it very actionable. Two or three different modules, nothing overbearing, and then it's got an action item at the end for them to take. So that's just another example. We do have more questions coming in. I will say this in lieu of time, if there's anything that we don't answer, we will gladly answer offline through email, or we'll be able to get in contact somehow. Another question I do have, want to go ahead and bring up. It says, does your work and partnership specifically impact out of school young adults? Example, high school and recent college graduates. This is a demographic I work with and would love to hear what organizations and spaces are thinking about in this group. I'll say this. So as far as EverFi goes with our financial education, we kind of have a difference in product. We have what we consider a K-12, which, Mass Mutual is very successful in that middle school age, that kind of junior high, middle school, adolescence age. We have a very high demographic that works with the high school. There's a little over half of the states, I think it's 27 states now, have a mandate that in order to graduate high school, you have to take personal finance. Those that don't have that mandate, about 23 others or 22 others states have that it has to at least be offered. They don't have to take it, but it has to be available to them. So we've got those two. And then we have, and you've heard Casey mention kind of our consumer or adult consumer. We have products that are called Achieve and Engage. And that kind of shifts the spectrum to not an emphasis as much on school, but it's really that young adult and then your generational cycles. That's Gen X, Gen Z, millennial, Gen Alpha. So and that runs the gamut. We've got over 110 financial topics that go anywhere from retirement to wealth transfer to being able to afford or pay for continuing education, home buying, debt repayment, so it kind of fits the entire spectrum. Let's see what else, what other questions we've got. I think there was one more. And this one might have to be offline. Casey, this might be something for you and I to follow up. It says, is there an example of a visual that anyone can share that's showing kind of the financial decision of the customer journey, kind of the customer journey map and what that looks like? And I think we've got something with EverFi that we can share on that. So we've got about a minute left. I will say, first off, thank you to Casey, Dennis, and Brooke for the dynamic and inspiring discussion. You all have been a wonderful panel. There is subject matter experts galore, and that's what I love. A lot of good insight. Thank you again for FHN for hosting and all the members and viewers that have joined us today. If you have not already, join us at the upcoming Emerge to continue the conversation. Where I personally will be a panelist. Mass Mutual will have several attendees there as well. I believe on your screen now, FHN has a discount code available for you if you scan the QR code. But the discount code is Emerge or is EverFi 500, and that will give you $500 off of the Emerge, and that's in San Diego, California. Currently, I think we've got just over 400 attendees, and the weeks coming up too, that always jumps up. So that'll be a really good and insightful conference. And again, we would love to see you all there. I would say stay connected with us at EverFi and the Financial Health Network, and let's keep building solutions that last across generations. And again, thank you for everybody in attendance, and FHN, thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, y'all have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day.